Metro 2035 is allegedly the final book from Dmitry Glukhovsky's mainline Metro series, and boy, does it deliver a satisfying conclusion. It settles many of the mysteries of the settings thus far, and serves as a sort of tonal culmination of 2033 and 2034. The premise is somewhat unassuming, though. Artyom is unsatisfied with his life in exhibition, even though things are pretty comfortable in a married life with Anya, and goes with Homer to seek out a radio operator who has supposedly spoken to survivors outside of Moscow. I'd say it's more about the journey than the destination, but Artyom's dissatisfaction is extremely important to understanding the themes of the book. Mind you, as I theorized in my video about Last Light in 2034, the timeline this is set in is the same as the games, with mostly the same plot as the aforementioned game, concurrent with the aforementioned book. There is a conspicuous absence of the Baby Dark One subplot, but the defense of D6 is a major background element of the story. Apparently, Artyom spent only a year or two with the Rangers and left shortly after the defense of D6. Since the end of 2034, Hunter has gone missing and Homer has gone walkabout, looking to finish his history book. Since the story is somewhat crowded, the book seems almost to be a reconciliation between two separate identities. In 2033, the Metro was the main character, the subject of Artyom's Odyssey-style journey. 2034 was more of a character study with Homer, Hunter, and Sasha. 2035 is a little bit of both, with both the study of Artyom but also a look at the most desperate and disgusting parts of the Metro, from wild, half-abandoned stations to concentration camps to brothels and secret bunkers. Really, the driving motivation of this story more than anything else is that Artyom is hell-bent on securing a future for people outside of the Moscow Metro, and that someday they'll be able to leave the underground. He spends his days desperately searching for radio transmissions from the outside world, finding none. He thinks they're going to lose their humanity soon enough if they're trapped underground, never seeing the sun. The other running theme of this book is the resolution of a couple of mysteries, but I can't go further on that without an obligatory spoiler alert. A theme that I've noticed throughout the previous Metro books is that the world is at once larger and smaller than the people in the Metro think. In 2033 they find D6 and it's completely empty. And once they remove the one patently supernatural thing from the setting, there's nothing left. In 2034 they spend the whole plot hyping up the Emerald City, and then it doesn't exist. What this all builds is a sort of perverse form of magical realism. In 2035, this pattern continues, but in a different way. Two of the major conspiracy theories that have been around the edge of the setting from the beginning are proven true. Firstly, when Artyom hijacks a mysterious radio station at the edge of Moscow, he suddenly hears other voices in other languages. Shortly afterwards, he runs into travelers from another city in Russia, who say they've lived above ground their whole lives. Yes, it is finally confirmed true. There is human life, not only outside the Metro, but outside of Europe. In some places it even seems there are people living above ground. Moscow is not reflective of the state of the world, being particularly badly irradiated by intact nuclear material for intercepted warheads in the air above. The world is so much bigger than the people in the Metro would ever know, and the state of the human race much less dire. But again, the Metro is in fact smaller than it would appear. The mysterious radio station is in fact a jamming array, operated by an alliance of the Red Line, Hansa, and the Order. Miller believes that the USA is still alive, and not only were the travelers that Artyom met CIA saboteurs, who he has executed, but if the Western powers detect any radio signals from Moscow, the war will begin again. On a slightly less insane and more personal level, Miller is upset that Artyom has abandoned his daughter, but moreover, he's a paranoid wreck. For all the life that is still out there, civilization has been toppled. If the travelers were, as he claims, foreign provocateurs, the enemy must already know there's still life in Russia, and if they're as powerful as they believe, they already could have exterminated the Metro in a heartbeat. While he wants the men of the Metro to walk the earth again, he really only thinks the way they can do so is with the Kalashnikov over the corpses of their enemies. The deaths of his men at D6 have really worn heavily on his mind, and he's started to snap. These strange justifications aside, Artyom and some of his new friends go back into the fold as members of the Order. They are needed now more than ever, given that the mushroom crops are failing due to a blight and violence is brewing. That is, until he finds that all the Order is really doing in this day and age is acting as errand boys, delivering vast quantities of cartridges to the Reds and the Reich in order to pay them off for peace. After seeing a crowd of starving citizens gunned down with the cartridges he just delivered, he goes rogue. After an unexpected, unprotected jaunt onto the surface, Artyom stumbles, radiation poisoned, back to Svetnoy to see Sasha. If I didn't mention it already, she escaped Tula and is now working, of her own accord, as a prostitute. Seeing that he is about to die of infections and radiation poisoning, she turns him over to her true masters, the Invisible Watchers. Yes, It turns out the rumors were true, and instead of fleeing into the Urals or dying, the Russian government has been hiding in bunkers adjacent to the metro the whole time, manipulating the events from the sidelines, living in luxury. That isn't to say that they haven't been busy. Through a combination of blackmail and manipulation, they are puppeteering all the other factions in the metro, valuing continued societal stasis over everything else. They are orchestrating the Jammer network, wanting to keep people with their focus inside the metro or united against some ambiguous outside foe. Artyom, of course, is absolutely appalled, having seen how desperate things are getting in the rest of the stations and the horrible human cost that being bound to the cursed ground of the metro is having. Their boss Besilov doesn't really see Artyom as a threat, so cuts him loose back into the metro once he rejects his offer to join the Overseers. This sets him on a hell path to try to get to Miller and expose the Overseers and free the metro from their pure ideology. Things don't really get any better when this leads to being put on a drumhead in front of the Order for not following orders, and a violent mutiny between those who feel they disrespect the dead by paying off the same Reds who killed their comrades at D6, and Miller's new Hansa recruits, who are probably being employed by the Overseers. Artyom's supporters storm off to find the Watcher's bunker, to find the truth. But when they return, none of them can stand to face Artyom, and they quietly disperse. They've betrayed him. Even Homer has been bribed with a place at Polis, where he can stay writing his history of the metro. They have all been convinced that this is where they belong, in the dark, as human moles. It is then that they play a supposed ominous transmission from the United States over the PA, as if to establish them as a threat, one that the entire metro must unify to face in a final conflict. Artyom, disgusted and drained, retreats back to exhibition, back to Anya. He's welcomed back by his stepfather, and they sit around to have a healthy meal of pork. He can't convince anyone to leave the station, so he hopes they can become independent from the corrupt system. The problem is, their mushrooms have died, just like everyone else's, and they have to buy pig feet from Hansa. Artyom then wonders, if there are no mushrooms, where's the pig feet coming from? Then he remembers all the dead at the Red Line stations, and the dissolution of political boundaries which has taken place. It is only now that Artyom realizes that the metro is truly beyond saving, even if they don't know it yet. There's nowhere to hide, and he can barely keep down his last good meal. The book ends with Artyom and Anya fleeing Moscow in a station wagon inherited from one of Artyom's stalker friends, towards an uncertain future. The big thing I take away from this story is that anything can be survived if it's temporary. For much of the time I was writing this analysis, the power had gone out in my house. The anachronism of typing away next to some candlesticks and watching as the battery slowly ticked down on my laptop established the mood quite well. But I could look out the window and see the lights in the distance, and I could quite rationally say that the power will come back on sometime. That's why I didn't lose hope. That's what keeps someone a civilized man and not calling dibs on the body parts of your sickly neighbors. Artyom is searching for those lights in the distance, not an optimist so much as a pessimist about the current odds for metro dwellers. Everyone else seems to be just looking at their feet, accepting their current position. Another running theme is that of surveillance and societal control. Panopticism is a concept coined by French philosopher Michel Foucault, who in a short-form way is describing how spaces can reinforce power relations and oppression by design. The implication being that Metro is very much a panopticon, a sort of ant farm where people can be divided and controlled. The Reich, Polis, and the Reds all represent the different humors of the social body and give the people who join them the illusion of independence, where there is in fact none. Mr. Gulkovsky seems to be channeling his displeasure with the state of Russia right now with this book. In his recent AMA, he talked about how influential the post-Soviet mindset has been on his work, and how much the Metro series has been shaped by his experience living in the crumbling post-Soviet Russia. That sensation of your entire world coming apart in an instant, and then having to scrape for scraps among its skeleton is quite familiar to him. Combined with the conspiratorial elements of 2035, this paints a pretty picture of where he thinks Russia is going. Overall, Metro 2035 is by some margin my favorite work from the Metro universe. It ties together all the elements and styles from the first two books and brings Artyom and the Metro to its logical conclusion. If you read and enjoyed the previous books, I can't recommend it anymore. This is the Bellman, signing off.